So today what I'm going to show you how to do is to make this perfect round loaf of bread. This is a real easy 3-step no-knead bread. It's called a boule. In French it means a ball. It's a real simple bread. It takes about 3 minutes to put the ingredients together and then about another 45 minutes to bake it. So this is a great project if you're staying at home like everyone is. Great to do with your kids, or if you've never baked bread by yourself, then this is a great way to start. So let's get going. Okay, so this is what we need for some basic tools to make this 3-step no-knead bread. You're going to need a simple plastic mixing bowl, something to stir up the ingredients with, a bread knife, a small knife that you'll use to score the bread, measuring spoon, a dry measure cup, a regular measuring cup, some parchment paper, and a good Dutch oven, something similar to this that you can cover and put in the oven. And this really gives the bread a nice even bake and keeps the steam inside for a nice crispy crust. Okay, so we're just going to be using 4 simple ingredients. You need some instant yeast, quick rise yeast. You need a little bit of salt. You need about 1.5 cups of water. And you need some flour. Now I use all-purpose flour. You can use bread flour. I just find the all-purpose flour just a little more versatile. And my preference is to use the King Arthur flour, the unbleached. It's a really versatile flour and is pretty forgiving, and it tastes pretty good too. I buy it in a 25-pound bag. You can buy it in a 5-pound bag in the local grocery stores. I just prefer the King Arthur flour because it's local, but certainly you can use any other all-purpose flour. But I suggest you try to find one that is unbleached. Okay, so you've thoroughly washed your hands, and now we are ready to make the dough. This is really quite simple. We're going to start with the dry ingredients first. Using a dry measure cup, scoop out your first cup. This is called the scoop and sweep method. Simply fill up the cup with the flour and then just sweep it off. That'll give you one nice even cup of flour. So we're going to do 3 of these. 1, real simple. 2, and 3. Now we'll go with our yeast, and for this, because the dough is going to rise, or it's going to oatilize overnight, you really need only a little bit of yeast. So we're going to use just 1/4 teaspoon. Throw that in there, and then we're going to use 1.5 teaspoons of the salt. Now, the reason that we're doing the dry mix first is so that we can mix up all of these 3 ingredients and get a nice, good blend. If you don't do that, it's a little bit hard to do it once the water is in. And what you want to do, especially with the yeast, is you want to make sure the yeast is fully incorporated into the flour so you get a nice even rise. Otherwise, you get these sort of chunky hot spots where the yeast has concentrated. So we just want to mix that up, give that about 30 seconds, mix that around, and then you're ready to go. Then you're going to take 1.5 cups of room temperature water, put that in there. And again, we're going to start to just blend this. And all we're trying to do here is really incorporate the water into the flour and the yeast and the salt and sort of get a fairly even blend. But you don't have to worry about this too much. Keep in mind, this is a no-knead bread, so we don't have to work it too hard. But what we're going to do is just kind of stir this around, make sure that most of the water is incorporated, and making sure to scrape the sides so that you have nothing left on the sides. Everything should be towards the bottom of your mixing bowl when you're done. And that's about it. Like I said, about 30 seconds, you should be good to go. Get off the excess. And once you're happy with that, make sure it's all in the middle. All you got to do is take a bit of plastic wrap, cover your bowl. It doesn't have to be tight. All you're just trying to cover it to keep most of the moisture in. And then we're going to set it aside for at least 12 hours. And that's it for the for the dough. Okay, so you've let the dough sit overnight. It's done a bit of a rise. If you've done it properly, then it should be nice and bubbly. Actually, it looks a little bit sort of like porridge. There should be some bubbles on it, some holes, and yeah, ready to rock and roll. So what you want to do now is you want to get the dough ready to be put onto the parchment paper and then put into the oven. Now, this is step number 2. And there's really 2 ways to go about finishing the bread and transferring it into the oven for the second step. There's a real simple and easy way of doing this. It's really kind of no fuss. And that is that you simply take the dough from the pot, from the bowl here, and just dump it onto the parchment paper. Just put it in a big sort of sticky lump, and then take it and put it into your Dutch oven, and then put that into your regular oven. But I'm going to talk to you about a way that takes a little bit more time. It's still only 3 steps, but it just makes a nicer bread. It definitely has a better crumb. There's more holes in it. It has a nicer crumb, a better crust, and it just looks a lot better. So here's what we're going to do. We've got our dough. We take a nice helping of flour in your hand and just sprinkle it over the top of the dough. And then make sure you have quite a bit of the flour on your clean hands. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to take the side of the bowl and we're going to just scrape the dough off the side of the bowl. You got lots of flour in there, so it's a little bit hard to handle this dough because it's so sticky. It's has very high hydration, which means it has a lot of water in it compared to a dough that you would knead by hand. So it's a little bit sticky, a little bit hard to work with, but nevertheless you can work with it as long as you put a little bit of flour. So be generous with the flour and just dump it out onto your working surface that's also being well floured. Now what we're going to do is we're going to prepare the dough for proofing, which is really the second rise. And what we want to do is we want to get this into a nice shape so that the bread will look good once we put it in the oven. So all you're going to do is you're going to take the whole mass of dough into both your hands, and you're going to cup your fingers underneath. You're going to put your fingers underneath the dough, and you're going to push the dough in. You're going to push the sides of the dough in as it rotates slowly in your hands. This is a quick process, take about 30 seconds. And what that does is it creates tension on the surface of the dough and gives it a nice finish for when you're ready to put it in the oven. It's not all lumpy. It'll have a nice golden crust to it, nice smooth golden crust to it. So again, we're going to pick this up, nicely well floured, and I'm tucking this in. And the way you do this is just hold it in 2 hands, and you can see I'm just turning it, and with my fingers, which you can't see very well, my fingers, I'm just tucking the dough. I keep tucking the dough in. Look how the surface of the dough now is becoming nice and smooth. It's becoming a nice smooth surface, and that's it. That's all you have to do, and you're ready to go. It's round, it's well formed, and the skin is nice and tight on it, so you know that it's going to come out nice and smooth. What you want to do now is you want to cover the dough and let it proof for at least an hour. You can go from 60 to 120 minutes, 1 to 2 hours. I usually go about an hour. If it's cold in your house, maybe want to let it go a little bit longer. But an hour normally gives you a nice proof and ready to put in the oven. Okay, so what you want to do is now that you've got this nice dough formed and ready to go, you just want to quickly pick it up real easy and just transfer it onto a piece of parchment paper that also has flour on it. Just put it on a piece of parchment paper, let it sit there right in the middle, and what you want to do is you want to cover this with a piece of plastic wrap. But first you want to just put a little bit of cooking oil or olive oil on the dough before you put the plastic wrap, otherwise it'll stick. An easier thing to do, and what I like to do is I'll just take the mixing bowl and I'll put that right on top of the dough. Okay, so we're up to step 3. This is probably the best part of doing the whole bread, and that's actually putting it in the oven, doing the baking, and see how it turns out. And this step is actually quite simple. So what you're going to do is you're going to take the cover off of your dough. Hopefully it's been sitting for at least an hour, possibly 2 hours if it hasn't risen enough. And it should be about it should have doubled its size approximately, and then it's ready to go. So the first thing you can do is you're going to take just a little bit of flour and just loosely spread it over the dough, and that'll actually make the bread look a little bit nicer when it comes out of the oven, and it'll help you when you cut the crust. Now what we want to do is we want to score the top of the dough just before you put it in the oven. And what that'll do is it'll let the dough expand without just busting through the crust, and it'll make the bread look a lot better. You can use just a sharp paring knife. The ideal thing to use, if you have one, is a razor blade, and that's what I prefer to use. And you just want to put in 1 or 2, 3 lines if you want, 3 or 4 lines if you want, into the top of the dough, and just draw a couple of quick lines like that. Make sure you get into it, and that'll allow the dough to expand once it gets in the oven without just kind of exploding all over the place. Now, what you should have done is you should have put your Dutch oven into the oven itself and let it heat up as your oven is heating. You want the Dutch oven to be nice and warm to give it a nice even heat. Be very careful when you're handling the cover, and the Dutch oven itself is going to be pretty hot. And then what you're going to do is you're going to just grab the 2 opposite corners of the parchment paper and just drop it in here. Now I want to talk a little bit about the Dutch oven and why we use a Dutch oven. There's 2 reasons. The first reason is it really gives it a nice even heat. Most ovens, like my oven, have hot spots. When you put it in a Dutch oven, it really makes the heat even throughout the baking process. And the second reason is that the moisture that's trying to escape from the dough is kept inside the oven, and that steam creates a really nice crispy crust. So go ahead, put it in your oven, again 450 degrees, and you're going to bake for about 40 minutes or so. After the 40 minutes are up, you want to open up the oven, carefully remove the cover, and close the oven back up again, and then go for about another 5 or 8 minutes. But what you want to do, all ovens are a little bit different. You want to look at the crust and make sure that it's a nice golden brown. If it starts to smell like it's burning, you know that you've gone probably too far. So check it out. Maybe you want to start 35 minutes or so before you take the cover off. Have a look at the crust. When you're done baking it with the cover off, it should be a nice golden brown. Okay, so this is what we've been waiting for. The bread has been in the oven for about 40 minutes. You've hopefully removed the cover after about 40 minutes and let it sit for about an additional 5 minutes or so, just to allow the outside to get nice and brown. And what you really want is you want your crust to be a deep golden brown. Then you know the bread is just perfect. So we'll take the Dutch oven out. And then all you really have to do is just carefully grab the parchment paper by the corners, lift the bread out of the Dutch oven, slide it onto your cooling rack, and look at that. Absolute perfection. You got a great loaf here. Now if you let it sit for about 30 seconds or so and listen to it, you'll actually hear the loaf sing. That's what it's called when the crust cools and it starts to crackle. You'll hear the bread singing. Now, you've got to resist temptation here. You've got to let it sit and cool for at least 30 minutes without touching it. Otherwise, the crumb inside will get kind of all mushy. I know it's warm, but you really got to let it cool. Let that crumb firm up a bit, and then slice into it, and it'll be absolutely delicious. Okay, so the bread has cooled down. You've been patient enough, hopefully a good 30 minutes, and now it's time to cut in the bread. I always use a serrated knife, and you're ready for this kind of bread. You really want to have a nice long knife, so you make sure you get a good slice. So let's have a look and see how this bread is. It's still warm, but it feels absolutely great. Look at that, we've got almost a perfect crumb. Lots of holes in it, and really airy and spongy. I think this bread's gonna be pretty good. So I hope you guys try this at home, and good luck.